So I'm just here in Flight Simulator X at the moment, and what I just want to do is make the screen a bit wider, show you that I'm in the cockpit of an aircraft here, and actually there seems to be no sound, which is strange. So that might be because I've paused it, and I've now unpaused it. So inside the cockpit of a 737-400 in the vanilla model, the vanilla game, Flight Simulator X, Microsoft Flight Simulator X. We can look up here at the overhead panel, just check the lights. So I'm going to put the landing lights on. I'm going to put on the lights I can effectively, and I'm going to go to the overhead panel with Shift and 5, number 5. And just make sure the logo lights on, strobe, anti-collision lights are on, no smoking's on, and fasten seatbelt signs are on. So I'm going to set a few notches of flaps on using my joystick here. So I'm going to press the button to put 5 degrees of flaps on, which is 3 notches. We are going to set the autopilot and use the autopilot. So I'm going to set the speed hold to 180 knots, and I'm going to set the course heading to, well, Manchester's over in the west, so it's going to be roughly 270, and we'll deal with the rest of that later. We're going to set the heading again to about 270 until I found out the exact direction. In fact, we'll start off with runway heading, which is 320. So I'll set that to 320, which is runway heading. So that's now at 320. I'm doing this all from within the virtual cockpit, so I'm using the mouse to look around and scroll around. Altitude, probably only need about 3,000. Leeds and Manchester are very close together with only about a 45-minute train journey to get from one to the other. And vertical speeds will take us up at 1,500 feet per minute. Flight director goes on. The auto throttle will go on. And I will use the takeoff and go around mode, or toga, to actually get us to takeoff speed, and I'll set the engines to 95% of capacity for that takeoff speed, 96 actually. I'll set the auto brake to reverse throttle as we're taking off, and that's pretty much all I can do, I think, in Flight Simulator X to get prepared for the takeoff without using the air traffic control for permissions, which I'm not going to do. So aside from that, we can just do a yoke check, so I can check it's turning from side to side using the joystick and go back and forth. So that's okay. Can have a quick look out the windows, and we've got a look there at the side of the aircraft. We can just actually also look at, if we look at the spot look, we can actually zoom in and just have a look at the flaps there that are, as I say, set to 5 degrees. So with that done, I'm going to set this view to flyby from the outside, because it's like a dynamic camera view. We're back inside the virtual cockpit. I will engage the autopilot once I've lifted the gear and perhaps made a turn towards Manchester Airport. Just before I do the takeoff though, I will just look at the world map, because I want to get the radio settings for Manchester Airport's runway, so I can use the instrument landing system, the ILS, to land the aeroplane pretty much on autopilot. So if I double click on Manchester Airport, I can see there's 2 runways. We're heading in from the east to the west, so we want to take either runway 24 left or runway 24 right. That's 240 degrees or 240 degrees either on both the angle, but the left or the right facing that direction of 240 degrees. So just give a bit more space, a bit more time. In the air I will use runway 24 left, runway 24 left. Oh no, I won't, because it hasn't got an ILS frequency, so I'll use runway 24 right, which is used for these ILS landings, and the frequency is 109.5. So what I need to do is Shift F2, Shift F2, and I said 109.5. So I need to set this nav radio to 109.5, flick it across with this button here, and then after we're in the air, I'll activate that nav1 radio, which will pick up the signal from the runway and help us to land on autopilot. So without further ado, I think I can safely now click the N1 hold switch, which will start us into takeoff and go around mode. Then when we get to around about 142 knots, I will start gently pulling back on the yoke, and we should then get a good takeoff. So let's take off. You'll see the throttle is being moved up through that N1 mode. That's the autopilot on and off switch in this aircraft. Engage and disengage. So I might just need to use a little bit of rudder control to keep us lined up with the centre line. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, by the way. I'm not a pilot, but that's what I do when I'm playing this game. So we hit 80 knots there, and 100. So that's 140. I'm going to pull back gently on the yoke. A little bit slow to get off the ground there. Need to increase that climb quickly. Positive rate, lift up the gear, see the landing gear going up. Got a positive climb there of between 10 and 20 degrees on the attitude meter, which is the blue, the white lines in that blue square show you the degree of attitude. So at 3,000 feet, I'm going to now take the flaps down to 0. I'm going to engage the autopilot, keep at 3,000 feet, keep the runway heading, slow down a bit to 180. I've gone a bit too fast actually, but apart from that I'm quite happy with that takeoff. I think I'm going to go up to 5,000, although we'll be descending pretty soon after. I got up to 6,000 feet, and then what we want to do actually is start heading towards Manchester Airport. So we're going to turn quite sharply to about 210 degrees, and we can look around. Can use the joystick to look around, or the mouse, by pressing spacebar and then moving the mouse while in this virtual cockpit. To access the virtual cockpit, it's F9. See this beautiful dusk sky, some of the fields of England down there. Of course, the new flight simulator is going to have even more fantastic graphics and models for flying, which is really fun if you're into aviation. So just going to have a quick peek at the sat-nav, Shift F3 there, and that's showing the route that we want to take to Manchester Airport. It's saying 38 nautical miles. So probably want to head a bit further left. Again, using the autopilot heading, omni-bearing heading selector it's called. So we just can see as well here that our path is this pink line here. So I'm just going to get us lined up with that pink line. I've also got a piece of software which can help us as well, called FS Flying School, which is an add-on. It looks like I've uninstalled it. There we go, FS Flying School. Oh no, I need to reinstall that, so we'll not be using that right now. But maybe on another video I'll use FS Flying School, which is a neat app which gives tips around what everything in the aircraft does, and helps with landing, helps with flight plans in this software. So I'm going to just shift and return, by the way, shift and enter just sits you up in your seat a bit so you can see out the plane better, which is cool. Control and return, that puts you back, and control and backspace, that kind of brings you forward a bit. So all on autopilot at the moment. 34 miles, and we're turning in towards our planned flight route. So because there's not much going on, I'm going to just speed up the simulation using the options there to 4 times the speed. Go a bit left. There's a traffic there in front of us. Need to keep an eye on that. We'll go back to normal speed. And we've got a little bug now, a heading bug in this visual display. Let's just move to the left. It's picking something up. When we see both the heading and the attitude bug appear, that means that we are within the range of the localizer for the runway. We have got that switched on now. The nav1 radio set to 109.5. Just want to keep an eye on that Cessna there, which is above, but looks pretty safe. So that Morse code you can hear is the nav1 radio picking up the signal for Manchester Airport, or another signal which is tuned to the same frequency. By the way, I could be getting this wrong. As I say, I'm not a pilot. I'm just going off what I have learned here. So do, if you're a pilot thinking, what is this guy talking about? He's getting it wrong. Do let me know. So very much learning. Okay. Probably one thing I forgot. Should have taken this reverse throttle off. That's for sure. How are we doing? So we've still got no attitude bug. 23 nautical miles. Should be able to see the airport really in this. There it is there. You can just see the flashing light over there. So we can turn slightly towards that. Maybe to about 220. Though it is saying we need to move left. We need to be further left. So I'm going to sort of stay at around about 185 at the moment. Uh, 22 nautical miles to go. I just want to ease that banking, which is the turning of the aircraft, so it's not quite so steep on the autopilot there. And now we've got the attitude bug as well, which is helpful. So when we cross the line of the runway, and that signal which is coming to the aircraft and helping show our attitude in respect of the glide slope down towards the runway, it's showing that we're below that glide slope at the moment, but it soon will be above it at the rate it's coming down. So I'm going to come down to 5,000 in line with that bug. But this is showing that we need to go left before it moves to the middle and then to the right, which will mean we need to go right. So as soon as it starts moving to the right, I'm going to press APP, which is the approach hold switch, and that should allow the autopilot landing ILS instrument landing system to take over the approach to the airport and to the runway, and indeed to landing. So I'm also going to slow us down to 165 knots. I'm going to add 2 notches of flaps as well, and there we go. We just crossed the threshold of that localizer, it's called. So I'm turning off to the right, add another degree of flaps. I'm actually going to slow us down. I'm going to keep us at 165 because we are below the glide slope still. As soon as we start coming in line with this glide slope down to the airport, when this pink bug kind of lines up with the 0 line there on the attitude indicator, I'm going to reduce to 150 knots. And I can do that now because we're now above the glide slope. So we're just getting a warning there because we're going at a speed and a flap setting that will actually cause us to continue to go down in height, in vertical height, and we haven't got the landing gear down yet. So I will release the landing gear shortly once we are lined up with the runway. 14 nautical miles to go. I'm going to add more flaps. She's quite below the glide slope at the moment, but we're nicely lining up, I think, with the runway on autopilot as well. So I am going to take what my plan is for the landing is to come off the autopilot when we get to the stage that we're about 300 feet above the ground. We get to 300 feet above the ground, I'm going to take the autopilot off, I'm going to take the auto throttle off, and I'm going to control the throttle with my joystick, and I'm going to manually bring into land by just flaring the aircraft slightly, so slightly lifting the nose with any luck. So we are now aligning with the runway. We're at 3,500 feet at the moment. And it looks like the runway's at 230, was it? I can't remember the exact course, but I should set that course bug to the runway heading. Okay, we're lined up with the runway, you can see it up ahead. So there's the runway, set flaps to full. I'm going to lower the landing gear. I'll just get a better view of the landing coming in. So you can see we're a tiny bit slower than 150 knots, and if we got much slower, we'd actually stall the aircraft. But at the moment, it's a nice, easy speed, nice slow speed really to come in and land at in this flight simulator, in this simulated 737-400 Boeing aircraft. So a quick look around, just make sure there's nothing coming at us, and that's the radios that we've got on. There's a flight management computer there that's switched off in this model. Flap set to full. We will set the speed brake to armed so that the spoilers come up and slow everything down, and we'll also apply a speed brake setting, an auto brake setting, and now we should just gently float down onto the runway, or to just above the runway, where I'll take over and probably cock everything up like I have done in the last few videos, but I do want to try and get this right if I can. So back on the joystick. So I just try to get my throttle to match the auto throttle setting, and my throttle on the joystick, so yoke's still working fine. And oops. So should be landing in a couple of minutes. Kept all the lights on. Got nicely lit panels inside the cockpit as well. I don't know if that's right for landing, but just got to get ready for a quick mouse maneuver of switching off the autopilot here. The approach hold switch, the speed and the auto throttle kind of all in one go at 300 feet. So while not kind of creating too much lift and also not causing an issue with the landing. So coming up to the landing very soon. There's the runway on the right, like we said, 23 right it must be, and just 600 and 500. So we're above sea level, so I'll switch off, 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 off. Now manually controlling the aircraft. A little bit of thrust, just because I don't want to do what I did in Quito. A little bit of a nose up. And I'm just going to start applying the brakes now, so the auto brake should be functioning, the spoilers should have come up automatically, and they have from the arming of the speed brake. Just gently applying the brakes. And we're coming to a halt, and I'm going to come off this taxiway on the right hand side. You just keep the throttle going a little bit longer. Just on the speed brake now. I'll bring the flap settings back. I just need to get off the runway now. So I was really pleased with that. Much better than the previous videos. Just bringing this Boeing 737 in to a parking spot. So I'll leave it there. Really enjoy making these videos. I enjoy pretending that I'm flying these aircraft as well. It's really fun. Once you know how to do a little bit of the inside of the aircraft, especially with the autopilot, it can be really satisfying to land land reasonably well. Anyway, I'd be delighted to hear your comments, particularly if you are a trained aviation specialist, a pilot. Delighted to hear how well or how awfully badly I did from you. Otherwise, anyone else enjoy that kind of tutorial for Flight Simulator X, and we will just park here, come to park there, and stop.